If you've got a few minutes to chat, we're going to have bonus episode number 2 this week of the Homeschool Mom Chat. I am going to be bringing you Emily McDermott. She is the gal that I'm talking with on my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, this week, and it's about decluttering tips for homeschool moms. I've got her here. She's going to be chatting with you about your declutter challenges. So if you've got questions or ideas or thoughts, put them down in the comment section below. This is definitely a conversation point that I have on repeat with homeschool moms in coaching because, obviously we don't like clutter. That's the first thing. And also the second thing is it makes us feel cluttered. Yesterday in my Facebook group, Homeschool Mama Support Group, I had written a poll asking moms what is the thing that you feel most cluttered by, and I found it ironic that I wrote 3 or 4 things and I thought, okay, that's enough, I'm going to clutter their inbox here. And so I wrote, like the standard things, the junk drawer, the toy basket or the toy area, maybe the plastic storage container drawer, which is my issue. And then I didn't leave anything else. I just threw a few things up, and one mom commented just as I had the brain idea of, wait, we need to declutter our minds, of course, because that is the reason why we get agitated by clutter. And so then I was just about to add it to the poll, and Victoria in the group adds, declutter my mind. Touche. So let's join Emily McDermott from Simple by Emmy Podcasts and talk about decluttering. We're good on the cluttering.
Hello. Hi.
So good to see you, Emily. So
yeah, I haven't done an Instagram live in a while. I used to before the podcast. I would have a minimalist moms meetup every week, and I forgot how it all worked. So
I love
sorry.
I keep bringing people back on Instagram. It's easy
Yeah.
for just fun, and it feels like I'm having a homeschool mom chat with people. I don't know what everybody's doing during their day, but I just say, come to the water cooler. I've got my branded water cup, the only water cup, I should add.
Yes, right.
Yes, and it's just fun. But you know what? I was listening to your episode this morning and yesterday, and I was reminded that I have an episode dedicated to Marie Kondo and whether you can Marie Kondofy your homeschool life. And conclusively, I answered, heck to the no. There's no way. There is no way I'm going through my house to say, do I find joy in this thing? I'm like, I don't know, but what are you and where do you go? That's all I want to know.
Definitely.
So I'd love to hear, have you had any thoughts after our conversation of other decluttering possibilities? Are you having conversations with moms who are focusing on a certain thing that they find they need to declutter?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm actually part of 2 online summits, and my chats just happened to go out yesterday as well. But one of them is a homeschool summit, and so
Really?
I was like, oh yeah. So it's called Happily Homeschooling Littles. But
Love it.
we were chatting about how aspirational clutter is a big issue in the homeschool mom community, because when you get these curriculum or get these materials, you have this idealistic view of what your kids are going to do, what you want them to do, what you have the bandwidth to do. And a lot of times we don't want to give up on that. And so if we have something, we're like, well, we might use that someday. Or another roadblock or mindset issue is I paid so much money for it. And so we tell ourselves these stories, and meanwhile, it's not serving us or our child because we're holding on to stuff that we don't need. And then, as we talked about on the podcast episode, it's taking up our space, but also taking up that mental space. It's taking up our energy. It's taking up all of these other things. And I think that just giving yourself grace and recognizing that it's okay if you got a material because your mom friend in your co-op thought it was a good idea, and just forgive yourself and be like, someone else could use this, it's okay. And then really be able to focus on what works best for you and your family, knowing that that's going to shift, and that's all right. But trying to keep things that make you feel supported and good rather than shame because you made a mistake or you paid so much money, or if I had more energy, if I slept more, I would be the kind of mom that could do whatever, because
Mhm.
homeschool moms already put so much pressure on themselves because they're the parent and the primary educator,
Yeah.
right, of your child.
Yeah.
So take the pressure off and don't have stuff surrounding you that makes you feel bad about yourself.
Beautiful words of wisdom. You know, in the homeschool community, we have a term for that, decluttering your homeschool. It's called deschooling,
Yeah.
and coming away from the unhelpful schooled mindsets. And you know what you said about what matters. That's the key, is
Mm-hmm.
what matters. And so it's what matters for, you know, your own or your belongings, but also what matters in your child's education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think the other piece is, and I know we talked about it, but just recognizing that when kids are surrounded by stuff that is visual and tactile overwhelm for them, and it took a lot for me to and I'm not a homeschool mom, but just like to recognize
Yeah.
with my kids' books and toys and everything else,
Yeah.
that when they were just going from one activity to the next, I thought, oh, well, they must be bored, so I have to go get them more things because they don't like the toys they have. But they're just overwhelmed, and to recognize like how their brains are developing, and how there's a ton of studies about how kids learn and play more deeply with fewer toys or fewer activities or whatever. We're not doing them a service to have stuff everywhere and to think, oh, yeah, they're bored, so I just have to go get more things to entertain them.
Yeah.
And that was a shift for me as a parent to recognize that, and then get over the fear of like, oh my gosh, my kid can't be bored because then what's going to happen? And just like, yeah, experiment with less stuff. And I find that my boys do a lot better as far as like how they're playing and also playing with each other
Yeah.
if there's less overwhelm in the environment.
Yeah. That's beautiful. My most popular post on my website is actually about solitude, and it's focused on a quote from Maya Angelou about solitude. And I used it in the context of kids. I learned this by watching my kids, that that quiet time or the boredom time is actually useful for them as almost like a diving board into greater creativity. We almost need those moments of boredom as kind of like fallow ground.
Yeah.
And it works. And I actually think when we go for a trip somewhere and we're away from our home and all the projects and all the things that are surrounding us, we are away from it all and we can focus in on the things that matter most. And I think we do that in the adult world too.
Yeah, and you just think about when people go on vacation, you're
Mm-hmm.
not bringing every single book or every single toy that your child has. And a lot of times they're even happier than they might be at home. And then we always wonder, like, oh, well, why am I feeling? Is it just because I'm on vacation that I'm feeling more relaxed? No, it's because you're not
Yeah.
surrounded, by all of the clutter. You have the stuff that you need, and that's it, and you're fine. And yet when we're in our homes, we're like, oh, well, I couldn't possibly let go of this, and couldn't live without that. But I do a natural disaster exercise. I can't remember if I did this on when you were on my podcast episode, because I'm just about to edit that one because it's coming out soon. But you go on a trip and you have your kids and your spouse and your dogs and everything, and your neighbor calls and says, I'm sorry, your house flooded, what would you miss?
Mm.
Most people say photos. Yeah.
Photos.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well then let's figure out how to scan the photos, and then nothing else. Maybe if it was a sentimental item or like a family heirloom, take a photo of that, have a story associated with it.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to it, we tell ourselves these stories about like why we need something, why we would feel this guilt or whatever it is about getting rid of it. But if it were all to, get lost in a flood, we wouldn't really care,
Okay.
probably, about most things.
I'm going to do something that I never do, Emily, and that
Mm-hmm.
is like, let my guard down in a way that I don't usually.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time with the baby crib.
Oh,
I don't let go of the baby crib and also my things from my childhood that are my toys. Okay, so here's the thing. My husband, first of all, my crib is like 25 years old. It's officially illegal to use
right.
because it's a drop side, so it could theoretically hurt a baby. And so I know I'm not going to use it for my grandkids, but partly the idea that I'm going to let go of my crib is like, I don't know, a sign I'm not having babies anymore. Don't laugh,
Mm.
everybody, because I'm not going to have babies anymore. I over declare it. But also, don't want a baby anymore.
Right.
But I do want to smell all of your babies. I want to hold all of your babies. I want to scroll on Instagram. I'm one of those old grandma types, but I don't want a baby. So what the heck? What do I do with the crib?
Yeah. It's so funny that you were mentioning that. So I had a little cameo on a podcast called the Minimalist Moms podcast that I would highly recommend. And the episode today is about saying goodbye to the baby years and kind of decluttering baby stuff specifically. And so, first of all, it was a great conversation, and I would recommend listening to that. But in that case, same thing. It was a mom, kind of more, a little bit closer to my season as far as like kids' ages. She had 1 6-year-old, but like me, had struggled with infertility, but then was realizing like this is just, it's just not going to happen. Like, I have my one kid, I need to start letting go of the baby stuff and everything.
Yeah.
And it was hard because she said it was kind of like giving up on this hope. But on the other hand, when you finally are able to release that and be like, I know I'm not going to have more kids and it's okay, and shift it to the gratitude for our lives now and what we want to accomplish in our lives now, then letting go of that hope was almost like a weight or a burden released for her. And I thought that was really interesting because we can honor, it doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be that if you let go of the baby
Mhm.
crib, then it means that you don't care about X, Y, and Z, whatever that means to you.
Mhm.
You can let something go because you're making room for something better.
Yes.
And especially with the amount of space that a crib takes up and that it's not functional, then it's like, then in that case, you could take a picture of it and make sure you have a story attached so you can tell your kids,
Yeah.
this is why this matters to me. You don't have to keep it if I were to pass unexpectedly. You don't have to keep it in the house, but this is why it's important to me. A lot of times we just have to share with someone else why it matters to us.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of like, okay, I'm good. Like, it's okay. And knowing, not in your case because it's not functional, but for other people that have functional baby stuff, that you know other people that have living, breathing, crying babies right now can use it, is the
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah. You know, my youngest is almost 16, and they all know that I like the baby crib. You know, book, there's a podcast guest that I had on who is not even a parent actually, but she probably is the one person that taught me the most about parenting. Go figure.
Mhm.
Somebody that I adore. Her name is Sarah Susanka.
Okay.
She wrote The Not So Big Life, and the byline is making room for what really
Ooh,
matters.
love that.
I know that book is so good. I use
Yeah.
it every December for a group coaching intensive, but really clarifying what matters, what doesn't. And the one other thing I have a hard time with is books, getting rid of books.
That's so
And
funny. So the little cameo I had
yeah,
today, I talked about decluttering
oh,
books in that episode today. So
tell me what to do.
I'll tell you exactly what I told them in the pop. You don't even have to listen to it now. Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh,
So we want to use the power of artificial boundaries. Okay. So luckily, when it comes to books, bookshelves are boundaries. Okay. And so what you have to determine for yourself is how much space and energy and time do I want to devote to this category of
yeah.
things? Maybe for you, I want 5 bookshelves worth of books. That's how much books matter to me. Great. Maybe it's 1 bookshelf. Great. It has to be that you want to spend that amount of time knowing what it is, being that inventory manager, being able to clean around it, being able to do all the things you need to maintain it. And then, whether it be 1 bookshelf or 5, you're picking that boundary. And I think we talked about this on the episode, but I play this game with my kids, the love, like, maybe no. So you take everything off, not because, and remember, we talk about the Marie Kondo, like, don't take everything out of your closet and then be stuck with a pile. So maybe start with one bookshelf.
Yeah.
And then you take the things off there and you start with, what do I read all the time? What do I reference all the time?
Yeah.
What is sentimental for me? And you are starting with those loves, and
Yeah.
then you're moving to the likes. And then when things get a little bit full, then for those maybes, you have a decision whether you want to declutter them outright. And if not, if you're not ready for that, then you can use an out of sight, out of mind bin, where
Yeah.
you have a bin that you can't see through. And then you can put that sticky note on there for however many days, put a reminder in your phone. But then the trick is, because sometimes it can be Pandora's bin, where like if you look back in it, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that book. But if you don't think about any of the books in there, don't need to reference them, don't even know what they are, then try to have the courage to just like declutter those without opening up that out of sight, out of mind bin again.
But I have been slowly putting them into this local, like one of our neighbors has this really cool little, what looks like a post office box, but
Oh,
it's for books that, and so I'm like, well, if I put just a couple in there, like I've got 11 bookshelves. If I put just a couple in there, then I'll feel like somebody else had the opportunity to use them.
yeah.
Therefore, waste.
Just don't put them back in your house. Yeah, we have that too. We have a little library right where my kids' bus stop is. I can walk to it really easy.
Perfect.
And yeah, so same kind of deal. But also our library takes donations, and then I found an organization called Reading is Fundamental that's local, and I'll take bins of books over there. Those are more for kids' books that the boys have outgrown. But yeah, I just think that there's a lot of resources where you can kind of like find local places where you could bless someone else, and then are we willing to take those things that we put aside, and if we haven't thought about them, and give yourself a boundary that makes sense. Maybe
Yeah.
it's 90 days. If you don't think about a book or read it in 3 months, maybe you're willing. And also the minimalists have this cool thing. It's called the 2020 rule, that if you can replace it for less than $20 or get it in less than 20 minutes, like then consider letting it go, because it's like, what's the worst that can happen? You can probably borrow the book from the library,
Yeah.
depending on where you are. So
That with you on our episode that I,
yeah,
when we did a massive simplifying our life thing, actually sold the dream home and then sold a ton of stuff inside of it, including the Joshua Tree
yeah,
YouTube album. But it was a cassette tape, and I regret giving it away. But at the same time, like, do I have a cassette player anymore? No.
right,
Do I
right.
have it downstairs? Yes, I do. Do I have it? Yes, I do, but that's telling you how old I am. And somebody does consistently use it. But that's the thing, is that you have these emotional attachments to things that are challenging to let go. But living in the present is not living with all these myriads of paper or whatever memories around us. We were talking in the episode about going backpacking on a plane, and my daughter is presently doing that. Actually, she's literally driving to New York City for a big event today in one backpack. And we did that for a long time when we traveled. It was inconceivable to me when we first started traveling with a backpack. Me, my husband, 4 kids, everybody with a backpack. We're going for 6 weeks into Eastern or Western Africa at the time. I was like, this is not possible, but actually it absolutely is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned, just as far as like sentimental things, is a lot of times we don't think about the emotional weight that something has,
Mm.
and that it's not always the things that we have. It's not always a positive emotional weight. So for me, it was my yearbook that I had, my high school yearbook, because of course it's what you do. You just have your yearbook. And I realized about, close to my 20-year reading, I was like, maybe I just want to look in here. I don't even know these people. Like, I didn't remember most people. And also college was more like where I thrived. I like wasn't super happy in high school.
Yeah.
So I scan some pages. I know you can donate them to the library if you want. Lots of people reminded me of that.
You're
But yeah, you can. But I chose to, scan some of the photos that I actually cared about and then just let it go because the emotional weight was not a positive one. So even though
Mhm.
it didn't take up a lot of physical space, it took up a lot of emotional space. So we have to think about the emotional and mental space that things take up and not just I can fit it in my house, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, that's gonna open up a Pandora's box about my entire storage room of journals.
Sorry.
It's okay. I I know I've already given instruction to if I pass away, just back up a truck and push it and on fire or something.
Oh my
Are
gosh.
there any last thoughts that you have to encourage homeschool moms to declutter their lives or their homes too?
Yeah. Yeah, well, kind of like you said in the byline of that book that you have there, it's like what are we making space for?
Yeah.
Like I like to think about that a lot. And there's actually a song that we sing at church. It's called Make Room, but it's like I will make room for you to do whatever you want to.
Yeah.
So regardless of your faith background, like what are you making room for? Are you making room for joy? Are you making room for peace? Are you making room for connection?
Yeah.
Because if what takes up your space takes up your time and your energy and your focus and all the other things, then that's diverted from where you want it to go. So I just see decluttering as this reclaiming of what is most important. Thanks, Allison. But what's most important. And so that's kind of how I like to look at it. You back?
When I look back at that moment, I'm going to say that was a eureka moment because the phone fell.
Yes. Love it.
It's such a pleasure chatting with you, and we'll definitely have to do this again. So, you are found on your podcast, Simple by Emmy Podcast. Where do we find your resources? Is it
Yeah, sure.
Simple by Emmy?
So my podcast is actually called Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, just so people aren't confused. It's confusing because my brand is different than the podcast. But so if you go to my website, simplebyemmy.com, and then / resources, I have all my freebies
Godspeed.
there. Yes, yes. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, take care.